Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you've had a nice break, managed to get some refreshments. So, here we are for our second session of the summit, and I am delighted to announce we're going to be talking about 6 things I learned coaching high performance teams that I wish I'd known as a CFO. And a very warm welcome to our guest for this session, Damian Smith. Hello, Damian.
Thanks very much, Dan. I'm very
Okay,
happy to be here.
absolutely. We're very excited about having you, Damien. So, a quick introduction to Damien in case you haven't come across Damien before. So, Damien is known for his transformation from a toxic CFO to a highly trained systemic team and leadership coach. He also consults for a prestigious US-based business psychology provider and has led groups through leadership development programs for Oxford University Side Business School. Damien's journey from a toxic finance leader to a successful team coach is backed by more than 4,000 hours of coaching hundreds of leaders and teams across 6 different continents. His mission is that finance teams should be fun, fulfilling, and fundamental to creating a humane world and be a force for good. Now, as a recovering CFO, Damien is ready to share the 6 things I learned coaching high performance teams that I wish I'd known as a toxic finance leader. How's that for an introduction? Wow. So, Damien, I mean, I'm certainly absolutely intrigued. I'm sure the audience are as well. So, over to you.
Thank you so much. Let me just change that again. I apologies. I've got you on the screen. There we go. Okay, let's go off. So, why are we here today? I have promised in the introduction to deliver the 6 steps, as I said, that I have learned teaching and coaching high performing teams that I wish I'd known when I was leading teams in finance, mostly really badly. I will share a trust building technique that you can take away and use immediately with your teams, one that we've used hundreds of times with teams in workshops. And quick exercise that will allow you to be able to either connect with your purpose and or take the exercise away and use it with your teams to uncover and discover the purpose of your organization. So first, maybe a little bit about why I care about this. As Dan mentioned, I spent 25 years in some of the biggest tech and telco companies in the world in finance. Companies like Vodafone, O2, Virgin, BlackBerry, if anybody remembers them. And finally at Sony, where I was the regional CFO for Middle East and Africa. I, at that point, was lucky enough to get sent on the global leadership program in Sweden, an amazing experience. And it was extremely traumatic for me. I got the results of my assessments back and they were very anomalous. I was actually saying to myself that I was concerned about my mental health. I thought I was going mad. And thankfully, there was a coach that helped me work through it. And I realized that I'd been pretending to be someone else for the last 20 years in the workplace. It was a challenge to work through that. But when I realized it, everything in my life changed. Everything from that day onwards became about becoming an authentic leader, learning what that meant, firstly. And because of that, I went on a journey that ended up with me training as a coach and implementing everything I was learning with my teams. And by now, the teams I had under me were becoming more and more empowered and successful. And as a result, I got the headspace to be able to take on being the head of sales and marketing for North Africa, as well as the CFO for Middle East Africa, which is highly unusual. And after a few years of coaching in work and in the background, 6 years ago, I left and became a leadership and team coach full time. And that's what brings me here today. And the reason I care so much is because if I'd have just learned some simple things about self-awareness and how to collaborate and create teams, then my entire career, in fact, my life, would have been an awful lot more fulfilling and peaceful and enjoyable. And my desire is to share these things, share my learnings, if you like, with as many finance professionals as I can, so that we can create finance teams that are fun, fulfilling, and fundamental to change, because I believe that is the way forward. Right then, so just a little bit of admin. If I can share my screen, bear with me. Wait. Excellent. So we will be finishing at 4:50 p.m. GMT. Is that correct? Excellent. Please do ask any questions you'd like and respond to any questions that I propose to you in the chat. We're not able to hear you speaking in this setup, but I would love to feel that I'm not just talking to Dan, lovely chap though he is. I would love to get some acknowledgement, and please do ask any questions in the chat. And at 3 points during this presentation, we will be sending a poll to you to ask specific, simple, straightforward questions if you're half awake, in order that you can get the accreditation for turning up to this from your institutes. Is that correct, Dan? Good.
Yes.
Okay, first thing then, let's stick something in the chat, please. If you would be kind enough to answer the questions, and Dan, if you can as well, that'd be lovely. On a scale of 1 to 10, how aligned do you feel your team is with its core purpose? So just stick in a number between 1 and 10, and I will see if we're getting any results there. So we've got I've got an 8 from Elizabeth, 7, 6, another 6 coming in from Norma. Khaled's got a 7, 6s, a few more 6s. I feel like I am doing the voiceover for a horse race. We've got a few 8s from Gus. Frank's got a 6. Excellent. We've got several people. Sarika's got a 9. That's a high score, Sarika. You should be proud of that. Excellent stuff. I am very happy to hear all of that. Next question, very quickly. How much of your time, and let's use as a percentage, how much of your time is spent resolving interpersonal or team issues instead of focusing on strategy? Again, if you could stick it into the chat for me, that would be wonderful. 75% Norma. I can empathize with that. I think I spent 80% of my time as a CFO with interpersonal problems. A couple of 2%, some very low ones, 10, 15, 35, 50%, 50%, 80% of our time being sent. Who's that from? Song Gizu, Khaled's at 5. Thank you all so much for replying to these questions. It really makes me feel good to know there's people out there. Got a huge range of answers coming back there, but some people, many around 50%, which is incredible when you think about your role as a senior finance professional. One would aspire to spending most of your time in the not urgent, but very important area of the Eisenhower matrix. That's obviously not the case for most of us. Next quick question then. Last question here. How confident are you that your team would rate their collaboration as excellent? How confident are you that your team would rate their collaboration as excellent? And we do moderately confident from Elizabeth. We've got some numbers coming in here. I guess we are talking about percentages. I didn't clarify, but somewhat confident, not confident. James is low. Hitan, not very. Brewery, we've got not confident at all. Fairly, we've got a fairly, a medium, a somewhat confident. Okay, this is really good data for us. We can get a feeling that most of us, as I would expect, are not very confident that their team would relate their collaboration as excellent. And we've got some data in a bit to back that up. Thank you so much. Why is that then? What do I find when I'm working with teams all over the world, with historically senior leadership teams, and more recently, specifically with finance teams? The challenges that come up again and again are finding and keeping the right people. And frankly, what does the right people even mean? That's a big question for most of the leaders I talk to. Getting dragged into infighting and silos. A CFO I was talking to yesterday that I work with said they were feeling like the referee in bouts of infighting. And obviously that isn't value add at all. And hitting the results. Of course, we all need to hit the results. It's all very well building a beautiful culture, but if we don't hit the results, then there won't be a business to support that culture going forward. Now, the challenge that I see is that most leaders think their teams are doing okay, but keep themselves busy and really avoid thinking about it too much. Or worse, they think this isn't relevant because their team's fine. Nobody's having a massive fight. There's no physical violence in my team, so we should be fine. However, there is good news and bad news. Dan, would you like the good news first or the bad news?
I would like the bad news, Damian.
I
Let's get
thought
it
you
out the
might say
way.
that. Thank you so much. There's some interesting data about this. The bad news is that 77% of employees globally feel disengaged. 77%. Toxic culture, and this is a very interesting point when you're thinking about payroll costs. Toxic culture is 10 times a better indicator of attrition than salary. 10 times a better indicator. That means that if you have a toxic culture, it has 10 times more impact than if you're paying people well, basically. Average US annual employee turnover at the moment is at 22%. And back to my point earlier about collaboration, the question you answered about whether your teams would feel they're collaborating. AIR, which is the consultancy I work for in the States, did some research on this. And 39% of employees believe their own organization, so their own team, in this case, your finance team, don't collaborate. The most interesting number that I've seen, though, is actually come from the surveys that we run before we do a team transformation project with CFOs and CEOs, but with CFOs specifically, we found that the CFO score is 22% higher than that of their team. So this means, on average, CFOs are overestimating how functional their teams are by about 22%. Now, of course, dysfunction might not be that obvious, of course. We've heard a lot of talk about quiet quitting. It may just be that people are not highly engaged and are not really caring and putting their all into it. Patrick Lencioni talks about a level of commitment that's like using little hands, like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I'm a little bit helping out rather than grabbing onto the problem and actually helping. And it doesn't have to be like that. We can create, because we've done it and I've seen it happening, teams that have a focus on results. There's reduced escalations, so the CFO or finance leader can actually spend their time doing the things that they should, focusing on influencing the business, building strategy, making sure the strategy is executed, and seeing their family and friends. And the last bit is it's easily possible to attract talent, not to be worried about losing the best talent, but having the best talent approaching you. The problem is that there are many common mistakes that we make. Assuming trust is built on reliability, thinking a harmonious team is high performing, as I'll explain later, that is not the case. Believing that motivation becomes from reward and recognition, a fundamental flaw in most people's understanding. And taking their teams and explaining what the values of the organization mean rather than what they actually are. Or maybe not even valuing them at all. We've all worked, I'm sure, in places where the values of the organization are just stuck on the wall and ignored. The last two then, only setting functional or commercial goals and taking responsibility as the leader, the manager of the team, for accountability. These are common mistakes we heard. I'd love to see in the chat if we can, if you have recognize any of those mistakes, either in yourself or maybe in your leader. Just give me a quick yes. And a number, they're numbered 1 to 6. Let me know which number, if any at all, you recognize. If those are mistakes, then yes, Richard, that's a great point. We'll come back to that, and you can let me know at the end if you still think that they are mistakes. 2, 4, and 6. Elizabeth's got 5, Rob 3 and 5. Yes, okay, good. Then we are recognizing some of these things. And I think it was Richard asking the question there, if they are indeed mistakes. I think we will see during this chat that they are mistakes indeed. Okay, so Dan chose the bad news first. We're going to move on to the good news, because there is a lot of good news. I picked this picture some while ago, and just today I noticed that young lady is actually using a BlackBerry, a blast from the past for myself. What I'm going to show you now is what we have developed over the last several years of working with teams based on the work of Patrick Lencioni and incorporating others that is popularized by a chap like Simon Sinek, for example. We're going to take a walk now from the pain points of a team that are not aligned, that are having infighting and dysfunction and are not hitting the results, to a team that are aligned, that attracts and retains the right people and overachieves the results. We call this process Thrive, the 6 steps that I've learned as a leadership coach that I wish I'd known when I was managing finance teams. So the first step is trust foundations. But what is trust? Many people feel that if somebody does what they say they're going to do, that's enough. But actually, we believe, and this is based on the work of a chap called Shepman, that trust has 4 different attributes. We have reliability. Does somebody do what they say they're going to do? We have sincerity. Do they say what they mean? Then we have competence. Can they actually do what they say they're going to do? Or more importantly, ask for help or be aware that they are not able to do it. And then finally, and this is the most important bit, is care. It's not something that I ever heard in my entire finance career, but from my perspective, care, this is the feeling that somebody has your interests at heart when they're making decisions. Does the other person view me as a human and care about my concerns and problems? Are we in this together. And that works both ways, by the way, your team caring for you and you caring for your team. This attribute of trust is much more important than the other three because the other three can be fixed. However, it's very, very hard if someone is feeling that they're not cared for to turn that around. We're just going to do a little exercise now, Dan and I, that you can take away with your teams. I do this in workshops, usually with a team, obviously. Dan and I are now going to pretend that he's the team. And I'm going to ask him a few questions. Now, one thing when you're doing it with your teams, please make sure that you're very clear on the following. Nobody has to share anything that they are not comfortable with. Yeah, we're not looking for people's deepest, darkest secrets. We're just being a little bit more vulnerable than we're used to. And I would repeat that again. So, Dan, I'm going to ask you some questions, but I don't want you to share anything you're not comfortable with. Is that okay?
Okay, Damian.
Excellent. Okay, then. And I will answer the questions as well. So the first question is, how many siblings do you have?
2.
2. And whereabouts in the order of those do you come?
I am the oldest.
Yeah. Okay. And where did you grow up? I forgot that question earlier.
In Essex, in England.
Okay. And what was the greatest challenge of in your childhood that you'd like to share?
I think it was trying to discover my purpose and who I really was.
Wow. It's quite advanced. I didn't start doing all of that until I was 45, but I'm feeling a bit less than now. I thank you very much. I have one sibling. I'm also the oldest, and I grew up in the UK in Berkshire. The greatest challenge I think of my childhood was I grew up in quite a relatively poor family in a very wealthy area. And that, I think, led to me having a bit of a chip on my shoulder, certainly as I entered my early adult life. It was a challenge being a bit different. Thank you for sharing, Dan. I'm curious, now I've just shared just a very little bit about myself. How does that, if in any way, does that change the way that you feel towards me?
No, it doesn't, Damien, actually. I mean, it's really interesting to hear what you shared there because certainly I hear a lot of people have similar challenges. So it was really interesting to hear that was one of yours.
Thank you. Excellent. Of course, Dan and I know each other quite well. And if you do this with your team, it's what we do at the very beginning of a team journey to just gently open up a little bit more vulnerability. And every time I do it, I'm absolutely blown away with the increasing connection that I see, as are the participants. It seems so simple, but it can have a really material impact. Now, I noticed that we're at the end of the trust part, Dan, so I think we've got a question for our participants that would like to claim some kind of credit from their institute.
Okay, Damien. So the question is, and it's free text, what are the 4 areas of trust? So this is a chance for you to demonstrate that you've learnt the 4 areas of trust. I will leave you to type those in. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of people type in their answers. So do document what you've taken away today as being the 4 areas of trust.
Okay. Let me know when you want me to carry on, Dan.
I will do, Damien. I'm just going to give it another 10 seconds just so that people can finish typing those in. We're still seeing lots of responses coming through. So just another 5 seconds if you just want to finish typing those 4 areas of trust, just to demonstrate that you've taken away those learnings so far. Okay, 3, 2, 1, final call, and let's move on, Damien.
Thank you very much. Okay, so after trust then, what happens after trust? The next step is healthy conflict. Why does it come after trust? I hear you ask. If we have trust, then people will know that they can have a discussion, that they can say what they really believe without risking the relationship. So only when people have trust will they feel safe to say what they really feel. I'm trained as a systemic coach as well, which is a team or relationship systems coach. And from a systemic point of view, conflict, and this is important to remember, conflict is just a signal that something is trying to happen. Mostly we feel that conflict is a bad thing. I remember telling people to not have conflict, but actually it's a superpower. If we can have conflict in a skillful way, if we train ourselves and learn the skills and also design a culture within the team that rather than avoiding conflict and creating an artificial harmony, actually gets curious. And we have conversations like, I'm noticing you feel a little discomfort over that. What's happening here? You know, and what the reason this is so important is because without people feeling that they have psychological safety, they won't say what they really think. And then you're not going to get the best out of your team. There's a wonderful quote that with trust, conflict just becomes the pursuit of the best possible answer. And if we can have that healthy conflict, and really, because you want people to get passionate and have huge debates, and maybe even sometimes to get angry because they really care about it, and be able to disagree and commit and move on and know that their relationship is not at risk just because they disagree. So that is why conflict is actually a superpower within your team that is being suppressed. Dan, I believe after conflict, we have another quick poll.
We do, Damien. I'll launch that now.
So this is number 2 of 3. There won't be many more.
So the question for people again to type in is, what is the systemic perspective on conflict? Okay, so I'll just give you a few seconds to type in your answer, please. So I've seen lots of answers come in. So what is the systemic perspective on conflict? And I'm going to give you slightly less time. It's slightly shorter answer, this one. So just the last 5 seconds, please. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, final call, and let's end that poll. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Damian.
Okay, so we've created trust and we've understood that it's not just simply doing what you're told. And as a result of that, we're now able to have an environment where people will say what they really believe. And this is incredibly important because if they don't say what they think, then they won't be committed to the decisions that are made and the ways of working. And this ways of working piece comes in now, where we move into real purpose. This is the North Star of your organization. Maybe some of us are used to hearing that a company has a purpose, but we believe also that teams have a nested purpose within that organization. Why is this important? Ernst & Young, who would not lie about this, they have found in research that purpose-driven organizations grow 3 times quicker than traditional goal-orientated organizations. This stuff really works. From a personal point of view, purpose is incredibly important because it's actually much more impactful on motivation than, as I said earlier, reward and recognition. People getting paid is very important, but it's actually just the absence of pay that is a demotivator rather than a motivator. So having a sense of direction, there's a Seneca calls this, the way he describes it is something that you will never achieve, but that you would die trying. Now that's a bit dramatic maybe for the workplace, but having a unified sense of purpose where people get the impact that they have on their team, the impact that they have on their organization, and the impact that they have on their world is incredibly motivating. Now, we're going to do another quick exercise. I would love all of you to get a pen and paper. And when we finish this exercise, if you would like to share the outcome in the chat, it's just going to be a sentence. So get a pen and paper ready. And I'm going to do this with Dan to demonstrate. Thank you for volunteering, Dan. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions. I do not want you to overthink at all. Just say the first thing that pops to mind, and we're going to capture those. We're going to ask you 3 questions, and then 4 questions, and then I will help you put it into a structure. Just take a few minutes. And what we're doing here is creating a personal purpose statement. Now, in many of the coaching modalities I've been trained in, this is a very long, laborious exercise, and really doing it very well with a team takes up to about 4 hours. However, what I've also found is that we can do this abridged version and we get at least 80% of the way there. And that's very accurate for one of these. This is the start of a journey, I would suggest, if you've never created a purpose statement for yourself or your team, but for yourself, you can take this and start molding it. It's kind of like when you go to a bespoke tailor and get a suit. You try the suit on and you change it a bit, you tweak it, change the language, change the grammar, change the structure even, until it feels just right. Okay, Dan, a couple of questions. So what would you say are your top 3 strengths?
So I would say creating a vision, and then gathering followers, and then I would say inspiring people to deliver the outcomes.
Okay. Now, to deliver outcomes. Excellent. Okay, next set of questions then. This is a little bit more obscure rather. As a result of interacting with you, we have an impact on the world. Now, you, by interacting with others, create an impact, a ripple that goes out into the world. That could be your world. It would be the same in your family house, the same in your organization, probably the same beyond that as well. So as a result of interacting with you, Dan, how would you like people to be?
Well, I would like people to be more focused on those around them
Okay.
and to support the challenges that people face.
Okay. I'm going to invite you to try and bottom line that into about 1 word. Okay. So you would like people to be focused or
Purposeful.
purposeful? What would you like them to do?
In a word or a sentence?
Um, a word would be good, or a word or two.
I would say to really, sorry, I'm struggling in a word or two, but
Okay,
to take
say a little more and we'll
action,
bring it back.
to really take action for what they want to achieve in their lives.
Okay, that. How would you like them to feel?
Empowered,
What would you like them to have?
support.
Okay, Dan, I'll get you to, I'm going to dictate a sentence to you now. And the structure, the grammar doesn't matter. But at this point, predominantly successful purpose statements typically have a doing and a being side. They have a how we're going to be while we're doing this, and then what's the impact of that on people or the world. So a structure that is nice and straightforward is I will use my. So if you write I will use my, and again we're not fussed about grammar at the moment, I will use my visionary ability to gather followers and inspire people to deliver for others so that people are purposeful, take action for what did I miss the last word on that? We could actually take action, feel empowered, and have support.
Okay.
And we could have used a different structure. I will, strength, 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 so that impact as well. That's a nice short one. I just got a little bit verbose. So can I ask you to read it out? And again, don't worry about the grammar because this is just a, if we're at 50%, that'd be brilliant.
Okay, so what you came up with there, Damien. So I will use my visionary ability to gather followers and inspire people to deliver for others so that people are purposeful, take action, feel empowered, and have support.
How does that feel?
Feels good.
Indeed. And I'd invite everybody to stick in the chat if you can, if you've come up with something, and please don't care about the grammar. This is a rough first draft. And what I'm going to ask Dan to do as well is to take this every morning for the next week and read it to yourself in the mirror. Have a little tweak, play with it, see if you need to add in some words or change the structure or the grammar, but to come up with the answer to the question, why are you here? Why are you here on this planet at this time? And I think you might find it's particularly useful. It's an amazing decision-making tool. Generally in coaching, we use it to make sure that people are making decisions that are congruent with their self rather than their intrinsic beliefs, rather than the extrinsic you should. So can I ask people to write to me in the chat? Let's hear some of these purpose statements. I will use my problem solving skills, my mentorship for others to help people feel encouraged. Oh, that's great. I will use care and empathy from Denise. I will use care and empathy so that people are engaged to cooperate with others, so that people are relaxed and have courage. How does it, let me know in the chat, how does it feel writing that down or saying it out loud is an incredibly empowering experience. And I'd love for you to go away and do this with your teams as well. Now, obviously, it will take a little bit longer and be a bit more complicated. I trust that if you listen to the end of this and then find out about how we deliver this as a course on the XLF program, you can come and learn how to do it with your teams. Okay, so we've got trust foundations, healthy conflict, because if we say what we really feel, then we can be committed to decisions and to a purpose. Also, though, to a way of working, your values. And when we talk about values, they're quite often just 4 words written on the wall. They certainly were in many organizations I worked at. There's statistically almost no correlation between the values an organization has, most organizations, and their behaviors. For example, Enron had the value of integrity. I don't know if you know that. However, values are incredibly important. Values-led teams have members that are, and this is important to remember, have members that are 4 times more engaged. Many of us are being measured on engagement in our teams. 4 times more engagement if the team is clear on its values. Now, it's not just being clear, though, it's actually living them. And to live them, we create what we call operationalized values. We dig into the stories of the team when they are at their best, heading in the direction of purpose. We listen to the stories and pull out the actions, the verbs that we hear in those stories, collate them, and then create operationalized value statements. This is why they actually mean something to the people, and they use them in every task, in every person, every day, because they created them themselves. And they might sit under a label under the wall, on the wall, but they've created them themselves and created a guideline for how we do things around here. Why does that matter? Well, as a CFO or a team leader, this means that people don't have to come to you all of the time with escalations, because they know how to do things and it's embedded in everything they do. Teams, again, teams that are value-led are 4 times more engaged. So if you're looking to move your engagement score on a survey, this is the place to go. And engaged, highly engaged teams are 20% more productive. Okay, then we have victorious goals. What we do here is we dig up the 2 things that a team needs to achieve in the next 2 years to be seen as a success, usually in the background. This is bottom up. We get the teams to break into groups and do something like a SWOT analysis, to brainstorm the outcomes that they would like, and then present back, have a debate, and then have a vote on them. The reason this works is because it's to create goals so that the team is a success, rather than and often different from the commercial goals or the operational or functional goals. This could be one team I was working with, created a goal that was all about empowering people in their organization, for example, to be able to hit the results that they needed to and be seen as a success. Lastly, we have vital accountability. Accountability, it's usually seen as the bad boy of team dynamics, but actually it's incredibly important, because if we've built trust foundations so that people can actually say what they feel and have healthy conflict, therefore they will be committed to the decision, the purpose, and the values of the organization, and the goals that you're creating to take your team in the direction of that purpose. if you do all of that and don't have accountability, then your team will not be focused on results. Now, one of the challenges we see, and I mentioned at the beginning, is leaders taking it on themselves to enforce accountability. If you take a team on a journey through all of these steps and then sit down and design with them, and you need to do it in this order, but when you get to accountability, you sit down and design with them how they want to be about accountability, and you put in place structures that we share on the program, then people will hold themselves and critically each other accountable. And it's not just top down. That doesn't mean, though, that leaders don't have to. I have an acronym for this: clarity. We have to create the culture that is the right environment so that people have the amount of trust they need to hold themselves and each other accountable. You need to lead by example, the L. Leaders modeling the desired behaviors and holding themselves accountable. Alignment. When a task is agreed, then clearly defining success and aligning on the commitments is critical. Relationships, building trust, vulnerability and openness. There's no point in asking people to do things if they're not emotionally in the right place to be able to do it, because they have a problem in their personal life, for example, that you don't know about. And then lastly, feedback and what I call yield reporting. That means confirming the task is completed and ensuring satisfaction. So we take the team through a process of agreeing all of this and put in place processes so that people hold themselves and each other accountable. Right, that is the Thrive model. Now, we've done this with many organizations around the world, and we've got incredible feedback, both from CEOs, and yesterday I was talking to a CFO that we've done this program with, and she's seen a massive change in behaviors. We did it back in July, and she's seen a significant change in behaviors, creativity and innovation within her team. The results are amazing, but I just wanted to highlight one point. The facilitation was excellent. Please keep on changing lives. The CFO that I was talking to yesterday was saying that at least 2 people have recently mentioned to her that they felt the workshop that we did, creating connection through using the Thrive methodology, actually changed their lives, which I don't know, that's why I get up in the morning. Anyway, we believe that when finance leaders build humane, high-performance team cultures, that they go away and they serve the business, not from a place of ego, but compassion and empathy, and they integrate with the business, not stand apart as a police service, but actually supporting the business and creating powerful relationships, that it becomes embedded in the business, and then finance is a force multiplier. And only then can we create sustainable strategy and sustainable execution. I believe that finance is uniquely suited, because of all of the touch points they have, to change the culture of a business. Because if the finance team is modeling a collaborative, truly collaborative team approach and is high performing and humane, then this will spread. People will get curious about what's going on in the finance team. So this is the way that I feel we can change the world, and not only hit results, but do it in a humane way. And if you would like to delve deeper, you can join the CLF Bootcamp. It's an amazing thing that Dan and the team have come up with that gives huge flexibility in learning. And at the moment, there are free credits. Is that right? 8 free credits?
Yes.
The XLF Bootcamp on this topic, which is Thrive and creating thriving teams in finance, starts the week commencing 24th February at 3:30 p.m. GMT. Please, if you want to find out more about how we could, if you feel you need implementation and support of coaches on the ground, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my name in my email address in the chat. I highly recommend looking at the XLF program that Dan's pulled together. My colleagues are all incredible finance leaders and powerful facilitators and coaches. I highly recommend having a look at what's available. And of course, I hope to see some of you in February. What I would like to do now is open up for questions and answers. If you've got any questions at all, we've got 8 minutes. I believe that's right.
Sorry, apologies, Damian. We
Oh,
are
no.
going to have to close, I'm afraid.
Oh, I
We
missed 10 minutes. My apologies.
No, don't
Thanks
worry.
very much, Dan.
I've tried to type in some questions as we go. So we've flown through to 50 minutes. We're going to have a few minutes just to do a handover before the next session. But certainly that was an incredible walkthrough of the Thrive methodology, which Damien said has had such a big impact on his life, and wonderfully to hear so many other teams as well. So I hope everybody's found that really helpful. Damien, if you could just flick us on to the final slide just so people can see what's coming up next. So in a few minutes from now, we are going to be reconvening to talk about AI-powered data insights. Some of you would have already come across Adam Shilton, our AI and technology expert, who's also from a very strong finance background as well. I'm really looking forward to that in just over 5 minutes from now. So a massive thank you to Damien again. Thank you all for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you back shortly. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for engaging.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye.